This is Mike, who you've been talking to. This is the some of the members of the PCAD Society of Illustrators, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike so he can get everything started.
Okay.
Hey, so I was just thinking, like, maybe you tell us a little bit of how was the transition from or actually just talk about what kind of things you studied in school first, and then just kind of how the steps you took to get to the position you are in now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Just a little bit about myself. My name's Brian Gossett, which I'm sure you guys have gotten that much information so far. I'm a art director and director at this production company called The Mill, which is known for doing a lot of fancy visual effects. They've done, feature-length films such as Snow White and the Huntsman, and recently Judge Dredd. We also do a lot of commercials, and we have offices in New York, Los Angeles, and London, and very soon Chicago. And we do design, motion graphics, visual effects, live action, editorial, pretty much everything that you would see in a full production company. But I focus mostly on original content that is narrative-based, which is either live action, illustrated, animated. It could be 3D, it could be 2D. That's kind of what I do at The Mill. And I live in New York with my wife, who you'll see in the background. She's making dinner. And we have two dogs, Max and Molly. And I was telling Mike earlier that Molly ate a bar of chocolate last night, and we had to take her to the emergency room. But she's doing okay. Good news. So going, I guess, specifically into my story and where I come from, because that's kind of what you wanted me to touch on, right, Mike?
Yeah, just kind of what you studied and how you ended up here.
Yeah, so as long as I was able to pick up a pencil, I drew things, and it started when I was really young. I just drew like crazy. I drew just anything and everything, and eventually I started to sort of target my sort of interests and my tastes in things such as He-Man.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, He-Man and Garbage Pail Kids, which were really big in the 80s. I'm a child of the 80s, so I used to, sort of come up with my own characters, like my own He-Man characters and my own Garbage Pail Kid characters, which were these kind of disgusting. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that because you guys might be too young. But if you can, pick up this book here. This will help you, Garbage Pail Kids. It's an awesome book. It has every single card from the 1st to 5th series. Anyways, so I drew everything. And eventually, my skills got better, and I started to dabble with different mediums, such as charcoal, pastels. Mostly from middle school to high school, I was using colored pencils. And then I started to dabble with acrylics and tempera paint and just rough printmaking type mediums. Forgive me, I'm trying to remember what it's called, the scratch boards, where you have a black scratch board and you would scratch off the
Scratch board.
Then it would reveal a white. Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but that was
Scratch board.
What's it called?
It's a scratch board.
Yeah, scratch board. That's what I thought.
You got it.
Yeah, that was my medium for a good 2 years in middle school, and and then I got really into contour drawing, which is you guys know it's a continuous line, and I grew up in Texas, so we had these rodeo art contests, because everything revolves around cowboys and horses, and I'm kidding, it doesn't, but sometimes. So we had this competition. This is my first sort of successful art story, which is I drew a cowboy with a cowboy hat and some chaps. I don't know if you guys know what chaps are. They're these like leather sort of coveralls for your legs, so you can kind of get down and dirty when you're out being a cowboy. But I did a contour line drawing, and it won this Best in Show at the rodeo for my age group. So that was kind of like my first taste of success, and I got really excited, and I was like, maybe I'm good at this, and I should keep it up. And my art teachers were very encouraging as well. So from there, I entered more contests, got more awards, and really decided that this is what I was going to do. I was going to be an artist, and I wasn't sure like how to do that professionally at that age, but eventually in high school, and my wife's going to get mad because I'm going to tell you guys something. I was on a date with a girl who isn't my wife, 16 years old, and we went to see this movie called Seven. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that movie. It's Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman were in it. David Fincher directed it, and the opening sequence where you see the guy and he's like reading his little weird serial killer book, and you see the cool animations of the actors' names over it. I was like, whoa, what was that? That was amazing. Like, I love that. I want to do that. And at the time, I wasn't aware that it was this motion designer. His name is Kyle Cooper, who's very famous in my industry. He's kind of like one of the grandfathers of what we do, pioneers, if you want to say that. But I thought David Fincher did it. So I was just like, oh, David Fincher, he's so good. He made this cool sequence. So I had no idea. And then a few years later, when I got into college, I finally found out that there's this thing called graphic design, and that he was a graphic designer, and David Fincher hired him, and Angus Young, who's one of these amazing award-winning editors who I've worked with, who works with David Fincher a lot, and he's won like Academy Awards. Anyway, so those two guys made that opening sequence, and I didn't know that at the time. And I only found this out when Kyle Cooper and a couple of the people from Imaginary Forces made a trip to Houston, and they did a lecture at this really cool theater in this part of Houston called River Oaks. So that's when I really got the lowdown on all of it. I heard about these guys who did these titles for these movies, and I went and attended their lecture, and that's when I was like, I've got to do motion graphics. That's amazing. So, while I was in college, I was still kind of on this fine art track, drawing and painting and, doing life drawings and studies. And I was drawing really realistically, but I definitely had like my own style. But then my friend was like, hey, you should try this graphic design class, this intro to graphic design. So I was like, oh, okay, let me give that a shot. So I did, and I immediately fell in love with it because it was like everything that I was doing as like an artist, but then you had this other thing, which was like thinking and coming up with ideas and concepts, and then merging your image making skills with like laying out typography and photography with all of this. So it was just sort of this amazing sort of, this is in like 1996, which, was kind of like when the desktop publishing was just on the rise, and designers were just starting to move from like analog, methods into digital. Up until then, it was kind of a mix, and a lot of the software that we have now didn't exist at this time period. But graphic design really took off around this time period because of desktop publishing and because of Adobe and Apple kind of creating these tools for us to use. So I got really excited about graphic design, got into that, had a photography class, and the next thing you know, like all of these things that I was doing were sort of coming together, and I was loving it. So I decided I'm going to be a graphic designer at that point, and kind of stuck with it. And I graduated in